Kalispera.
Good evening.
Welcome to this Cardiology Tribute Evening that we're transmitting live from Athens. We're very, very delighted to be present in Greece tonight. When we think about humanity, the cradle of medicine and philosophy was born here. And most of all, when we remind ourselves that some 2,400 years ago, the oath of Hippocrates was written in this particular part of the world, it is here in Greece. But also, it is here that many of the terminologies that we hear today frequently in medicine were used for the first time. And I'm talking in particular about words like cardia, angia, and of course, aorta.
Περικαρδίας. Έτσι ονομάζεται το αρχαιότερο έγγραφο καρδιολογίας. Είναι η πρώτη ιστορική τεκμηρίωση για την καρδιά. Έγινε τον 5ο αιώνα π.Χ. από τον πατέρα της ιατρικής, τον Ιπποκράτη. Στα Ασκληπία έγιναν οι πρώτες εμπειρικές παρατηρήσεις για την καρδιά, τον παλμό, αλλά και οι πρώτες χειρουργικές επεμβάσεις. Σήμερα, 2.500 χρόνια μετά, οι σύγχρονες εξελίξεις στην καρδιολογία έχουν μειώσει σημαντικά τα ποσοστά νοσηρότητας και θνησιμότητας. Παρ' όλα αυτά, τα καρδιαγγειακά νοσήματα αποτελούν την πρώτη αιτία θανάτου.
At Servier, we are proud to have more than 60 years of expertise in cardiology, always serving the cardiac patient. It's always a commitment to therapeutic research in order to serve patient needs. But tonight, this Cardiology Tribute Evening is dedicated to you, healthcare professionals who are facing daily cardiac diseases, but at the same time, it is dedicated to the patients and their families who are facing daily cardiac disease. So on behalf of Servier, we salute your courage, and we're very delighted that during the next hour, we'll be able to show you our support.
Όπως διαπιστώνετε, ο συντονισμός της εκδήλωσής μας γίνεται στα αγγλικά και στα ελληνικά. Είμαστε πολύ χαρούμενοι που παρακολουθείτε την εκδήλωσή μας από διαφορετικά μέρη της Ελλάδας, αλλά και της Κύπρου.
Our evening will begin with a very special presentation entitled The Glory and Threat of Science and Medicine, presented by Professor Sir Magdi Yacoub. It will be followed by 20 minutes of questions and answers, and then we'll move to a special part with our special guest, the patient, who will have a testimonial, before concluding with a tribute to the role of music in medicine, a special part prepared for this particular evening.
Στην απόψινή μας εκδήλωση, κύριος ομιλητής είναι ο παγκοσμίου φήμης καθηγητής καρδιοχειρουργικής Sir Magdi Yacoub. Θα αναπτύξει το θέμα «Το μεγαλείο και η απειλή της επιστήμης και της ιατρικής». Θα ακολουθήσουν ερωτήσεις και απαντήσεις. Στη συνέχεια θα παρακολουθήσουμε την ιστορία ζωής της κυρίας Λεβαντή, μια αληθινή ιστορία. Και θα κλείσουμε με τη δύναμη της μουσικής, υμνώντας το πολυτιμότερο αγαθό, τη ζωή.
We invite you as of now to share your thoughts and ideas in the chat room that you'll see in front of you on the screen. But not only that, you can also share as of now any question that you would like to raise, a question about the evening in general, or maybe question targeting or addressed to Professor Yacoub himself that we will be handling during the question and answer part. You can type your question in either English or Greek, no problem at all, and it will be lovely if you can mention your name and the city you come from.
Σας προσκαλούμε να μοιραστείτε την εμπειρία σας χρησιμοποιώντας το chat, αλλά και το κουμπί των ερωτήσεων και απαντήσεων, τον Q&A. Πληκτρολογήστε τις ερωτήσεις σας στα ελληνικά ή και στα αγγλικά και θα εκτιμούσαμε ιδιαιτέρως αν αναφέρετε το όνομα και την πόλη σας.
With more than 60 years serving the cardiology patient, our guest speaker tonight needs no introduction. He is Professor Sir Magdi Yacoub, Professor of Cardiothoracic Surgery, and he pioneered several operations to correct congenital heart disorders, but not only that, he played a crucial role worldwide in improving cardiac transplantation. We know that he has a special affection to Greece. He told us this many times when we were preparing this evening, and he has chosen to share with us tonight the topic about the glory and threat of science and medicine. Professor Yacoub, good evening. Can you hear us?
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Hello.
We are delighted that you are with us tonight. We thank you for your participation, and we all look forward for your presentation. Floor is yours.
Thank you for this introduction. And tonight, I am deeply aware of the honor and the privilege which has been given to me to address colleagues in Athens and the entire Greece, and maybe beyond. As you have just said, Greece has a special place in my heart, in my constitution. I love Greece like I love Egypt and the UK. Also, I have very dear friends who influenced me, my career, my personality in Greece. And needless to say, I'm not going to single any one of them. With that, I will start my talk for the period given to me, which is 20 minutes, talking about the glory and threats of science and medicine. The two together, they are related. And these are the points I'm going to be talking about. Definition, the glory and threat, what it's all about. And then I will use transplantation and regeneration as a model. And I'll end up by talking about global involvement, a very important topic for all of us medical people. So coming to definitions, science has been, can you go back one, please? Science has been defined repeatedly throughout the ages as the search for the truth. But equally, it has been articulated by many philosophers of science that science, that actually the truth, the absolute truth, is unachievable. That has been said by Sir Karl Popper and others. And it requires a bit more to get there. About that, I will talk more. It requires creativity. But what is creativity? It has been defined beautifully by one of my greatest heroes, the late Sir Peter Medawar, who defined creativity as the art of creating ostensibly out of nothing, something of beauty. Look at the choice of word, order or significance. Significance to whom? Mankind, obviously. Next, please. Now, ancient Egypt has a massive interaction with ancient Greece, and they influence each other. Now, ancient Egypt, they knew what I have just told you. One is the goddess of the truth. You see her here. Her name is Ma'at, was the most beautiful goddess. And it has been said repeatedly that the truth is beautiful. Here she is, very beautiful. But the next point is that the absolute truth is unachievable. And that's exactly what the ancient Egyptians knew, because if you come near Ma'at, she grows these huge wings and flies away. So we have to keep trying to reach the absolute truth. This is depicted very nicely here. Next, please. Now, the growth of scientific knowledge requires this, what I called about earlier, as imaginative leaps. But they have to be followed almost immediately by painstaking refutations. This is very, very important. And Sir Karl Popper, in a book entitled the book was entitled Conjectures and Refutations. In that book, Sir Karl says that once we need to have this imaginative leap, we require theories, which he then said that following advancing such a theory, which he called conjectures, we should try and refute it rather than to prove it. And many of us don't do that. But importantly, our colleagues come to the rescue and they supply the refutations. And we should be very grateful to them, because if they succeed in refuting our theory, after all, it is a theory, then we are nearer the truth. If they do not succeed, we are also nearer the truth. So we should take that in a sense of intellectual humility. We should never say we know it all. If we do that, we're finished. And that has been articulated many times by other philosophers of science, like you see on the slide. Next, please. Now, I go further. What is the glory of science and what is the threat? Now, it might be apparent to all of you, where is the glory? Next, please. The glory are many, but I summarize them in only 4. One is discovery. There is nothing more pleasing, exhilarating, makes us so happy than discovering something new which will benefit humanity. The next is healing. Wow. If you see somebody who was extremely sick or dying, and then you see him or her 20 or 30 years later looking the picture of health, that is healing. And you have in ancient Greece, of course, the goddess of healing. The next one is teaching. It's so important that what we learn during this short journey on planet Earth should not disappear with our disappearance. And therefore, we should be forever trying to pass on what we know to the next generation. The final and almost most important is human interaction. What a privilege we have to belonging to this specialty medicine and science, because it allows us to come into contact with a huge number of people, both patients, colleagues, national, international, wherever we go, we find human beings we can interact with. This is a wonderful attribute for science and medicine. So that's a glory for at least some of them. Now I come to the next one. What is the threat? The threat, as has been articulated again in ancient Greece, is doing harm. Once you have a powerful tool in your hand, which is medicine and or science, you have to be very careful what you do with it, because it's a powerful tool. And if you do harm, this is a disaster and a massive threat. The next is false discoveries. We must be very, very careful that whatever we publish or say has to have an element, at least an element of truth. And you heard about it has to the refutation story. The next one is over-recognition. This is very important, because as you go on discovering and enjoying yourself, society loves it. And what do? They try and idolize you or throw things at you, have more recognition, have more money, have more. But I don't want all that. I am happy as I am. I just want to have enough to live a decent life. And I do not want to be an idol. I want to be a normal human being doing his job. So this is essential, and it's a big threat over recognition. Number 4 is destructive competition. Well, we know that competition is important. You want always to be ahead of the game and do something great. But for God's sakes, do not keep looking over your shoulder and saying, oh, but he's progressing, I must destroy him. Why are you looking over your shoulder? He or she, your competitors, are trying to do exactly the same thing. And it is so much better to actually collaborate, because our real enemy is ignorance and disease. So we need to join hands to fight our enemies. And the last one, but this is ongoing a bit, is losing contact with the patient. And that is happening all over the world now, that medicine, and to some extent science, is seen as a commodity, that I go to the supermarket and buy medicine. I buy the services of medicine of doctors. This is a disaster, because you cannot buy medicine. It is not a commodity. It is essential contact between the doctor and the patient. And without that, both the patient and the doctor lose massively. So I leave you with this thought, which is absolutely fundamental. Next, please. Now, I like to show this slide, which was actually shown by one of my dearest friends and colleagues, the late Dr. Aldo Castaneda, who was the head of pediatric cardiology at Boston Children. And Aldo, when he was the president of the AATS, he gave the presidential address, and it was entitled "The Training of a Physician Alone Quest." I've shown Apollo earlier on, and the influence of Greece gone, of course. Aldo said that Apollo was the god of intellect, the arts, and healing. And he implied harmony, balance, rationality, loyalty, and discipline. All of these qualities, which Apollo typified, are badly required during the training of a physician, because he or she will have to use it sometime or another. Next. And now I have to speed up a bit and talk about transplantation and regeneration as a model. That is because I happen to be involved with those two things for a long time. And I would like just to expand very carefully over that. Next, please. Now, I don't need to tell you that the heart is an extremely important organ, as articulated by William Harvey in his book. Next. And in transplantation, only 60 years ago, it was referred to in the literature as a fantasy for the future. Then it was introduced 40 years ago, and following that, there was enthusiastic reception, moratorium, steady progress, but it was a qualified success. Why say qualified? Because you will see that there is massive success, because everybody says it is the success story of the second half of the 20th century. It is qualified because it has some shortages and limitations in the shortage of donor organ, and importantly, in non-specific immunosuppression, which causes a lot of problems. Nevertheless, it remains the gold standard both in terms of survival and quality of life. And for example, in the Guinness Book of Records, one of my patients survived 34 years of happy life when he was coming to the hospital in cardiogenic shock, dying. So nothing can achieve that except transplantation. Maybe we hear a bit more about that later on. Next, please. Shortage of donor organs, there are strategies being applied as we speak. Next, please. But the induction of specific immune tolerance, which actually started transplantation by this brilliant man, Sir Peter Medawar, where it all started because of his seminal paper in Nature entitled Induction of Specific Immune Tolerance. Now, about exactly 70 years later, the paper was published in 53 instead of 52, we haven't achieved it. And therefore, that is why we have limited success. And then he comes again and says, Peter Medawar, it is the glory as it is the threat of science that everything which is in principle possible can be done if the intention to do so is sufficiently resolute. Obviously, we have failed, but we can, there is still time to correct that failure. Next. Now, regeneration time will not allow me to accept maybe a few more minutes, is defined as either repair what you have or recreate new myocardium. And there are several strategies which are shown in the slide. Next, please. And the trying to repair the existing cells requires thorough knowledge of the basic mechanisms which cause heart failure. But they are complex. But that doesn't mean that we should give up. I'm just showing some of the pathways which were published from our center some years ago. The important thing is when you see a problem as big as that, you have to get the right tools. This boy is trying to conquer a swarm of insects with a broom. Well, obviously, he's not going to win. What he needs is the proper tools. Next. And the proper tools are coming in very quickly in the form of complex networks, but we must know how to use them, and artificial intelligence. Next. And the complex networks, there are many examples of them which are fundamentally similar. We can apply them in medicine. Next, but we have to find out which is important, which is not. And recreating myocardium, there has been several attempts to do so, and they're listed on this slide. Next. Unfortunately, the cell therapy has been very disappointing, except recently with the advent of EPS, induced pluripotent cells, by Yamanaka and his colleagues. That is promising in a big way, and we will hear more about it in the future. Next, please. Many of the studies which claimed massive success and given fancy names actually did not deliver. And I'm showing some examples here, which is a great disappointment. We should not raise the hopes of the community in a false manner. Next. Tissue engineering is coming up very quickly. Next, please. And decorating the scaffold is fantastic. Using the patient's own cells to populate the scaffold is the way to go. Our group is working very hard on that right now. Next, please. and many strategies for maturing induced pluripotent cells like topology. Chris Rao was a surgeon who went to the lab and produced brilliant work on how you can induce maturation of IPS into adult functioning cardiomyocytes. Next, please. Then, I'm coming to near the end, came some excellent work showing that you can reprogram actually fibroblasts into directly or indirectly into heart muscle. And this has been achieved. Next. Following the work of Yamanaka, showing that you can de-differentiate and then differentiate. Now, furthermore, more work from California. Next, please. By Deepak. Deepak showed that you can directly, you don't have to de-differentiate. You can take the cells directly from fibroblasts, and the heart is full of fibroblasts, into functioning cardiomyocytes in a rat model. This has been achieved in human cells by Eric Olson, for example. Next, please. And then finally, stimulating cell division. And Hisham Sadeh, who is a brilliant young man, Egyptian origin, working in Dallas, Texas, he has been studying why cells stop dividing after birth and inducing them to start dividing yet again. Next. Gene therapy was living under a cloud, and now it's coming back. Next. Next, please. However, the CRISPR-Cas or gene editing is a fantastic thing which is coming. Now I'm afraid I ran out of time. I end up this part by saying that reprogramming and dealing with heart failure is fantastic. But I end up by saying there is a massive need for all of us doctors. Can I have an extra 5 minutes, please?
Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so next slide, please. Global involvement is a must. And why is that? Next slide, please. Because it's so obvious that taking cardiac surgery and cardiology to the people is a must. If you look at the massive burden of disease in the world, 80% of it falls on the developing countries. And that cannot, and they're not getting it. And we have strategies to deal with it, but we have to offer that to 80% of people. Next, please. And who cares? Who pays? Is essential. Jane Somerville, the one who cares, who acts, who pays. That is manageable. Next. And there are many strategies to do that. It's always said that we are all the same when it comes to treatment, but the facts speak against that. We are not practicing an egalitarian system in the world, and this is a massive problem. Next. The size of the problem is very well known to you. Next. Then who acts, who cares is important, because there are strategies which we can use, and we have published that repeatedly. It has to be sustainable. Next. And this is one of the strategies. Next. How to do it, who are the stakeholders, and physical sustainability, and importantly, human sustainability. Next. Carry on, please. Next. And the chain of hope was created to address that problem, and these are some of the centers around Africa and Central America. Next, to address the problem. One of the biggest is Aswan, where a lot of complex surgery is being performed, research without asking the patient for any payments. It's all humanitarian, for free at entry. At the highest level, there is research, there is training, and time will not allow me to show you the figures next, but they are very interesting. State-of-the-art facility. Next. Nearly 800 arterial switch operations in neonatal babies would have died if this did not happen. And there are 3 stages. This is stage 2, for example. Next. And this is the staff. They started by a handful of people. They're now over 700. And they are very enthusiastic, all of them doing the work, very convinced that they are doing the right thing, working very hard for an extremely important cause. Next. This is the Aswan Heart Center. There is an evolving similar project in Rwanda, where almost the same concept of Aswan is being recreated on a very large piece of land donated by the government of Rwanda, and we're working on the same principles of Aswan Heart Center. Next. Research in Africa is important on site, and this is an example where the local population, including the chiefs, were carrying the equipment for the research in at site. Next. Sorry, I'm taking too long. And that's the chief, enthusiastic, pointing out to our researcher where the population are. Next, please. These are the center, the one in Ethiopia. Next, one of the centers. And that's the one in Ethiopia, in Addis Ababa. Next slide. Collaboration with Kampala is going on in Makerere. Next. So, in conclusion, science and medicine offer unprecedented opportunities for discovery and alleviating human suffering. This is the glory. But equally, major threats have to be watched if the objectives are to be fulfilled. Thank you very much. Apologize for taking more time.
Thanks a lot, Professor Yacoub, for this very inspiring speech. And most of all, for describing the chain of hope. I think this is the most beautiful word we can use this evening. During your speech, we had a lot of questions. So we will dedicate the time until in the next 18, 17 minutes for that. And I would like to start with a question that we get from Dr. Frakadaki. What inspired you, Professor Yacoub, to get involved in transplantations?
Transplantation is a growing specialty. Some people have said it has been replaced by regeneration and artificial heart. That is not correct. There is a lot of research. There is a lot into increasing donor organs. There's a lot of research, as I said, in inducing specific immune tolerance. And we need young people to get into the specialty for both practice, research, and development and service to transplantation, which, as I mentioned, remains the gold standard for treatment of advanced heart failure.
We have a second question from the University of Athens.
Yes. Professor Yacoub is from Maria Hionis. She's a medical educator for the National and Kapodistrian University of Athens. And she's asking, what advice would you give to the younger generation of doctors as far as showing patient-centered care to the patient? How important is good communication skills with the patients to the healing process?
This is essential, as I mentioned earlier. The first thing is to be convinced yourself that what you're doing is of paramount importance. The next is to be very close to the patient, communicating as the question, as I understood it, how important to be close to the patient and make the patient feel that you are his or her advocate at all times. And that's very important for the doctor because it makes you more dedicated. But it's also important for the patient to feel that my doctor, whom I asked him to take on the management of my case, is dedicated to me. Because it's a very specific question to say, can you, doctor, help me? So that relationship is of paramount importance, as I mentioned earlier, not only to the patient, but to the doctor.
We have a question from Larissa in Center Greece. I think it's a very original question. Someone's telling you, you have mentioned several times in previous speeches, a sort of memory transfer between a donor and the receiver during heart transplantation. Can you tell us more about that?
Mm-hmm. I think that's still an open question because at one time we maintained that the heart is only a pump. This is completely wrong. The heart is an endocrine organ which secretes a lot of mediators, hormones, etc., which influence the brain and every other organ. And equally, it gets re-innervated. So there is a communication between the heart and the brain. Now, talking about memory, there are many stories about that. To my own feeling and comprehension, they have not been validated. I mean, some people say, following transplantation, a young lady who was very quiet, loved music and so on, suddenly loved motorbikes and sports cars. And she found that this was the passion of the donor. I don't think that has been validated. It needs more work.
Another more, Professor Yacoub. It's a question from Thessaloniki. Do you believe that in the future we will be able to manage all the heart diseases? Is that achievable? We know that you are optimistic.
That's a very penetrating question. Heart diseases, we already know how to manage 70 to 80% of heart diseases. There are still a lot to be discovered, obviously. The big gap is application of what we know in the developing countries and addressing the disaster of inequalities. That we need to concentrate on while we are trying to discover more new treatments for the remaining 20 to 30% of what we do not know how to manage.
I have another question from Thessaloniki in North Greece. We have been taught at medicine school not to get too much emotionally involved with the patient. We see in your slides a lot of patients, and we see you with your patients. You look emotionally engaged. Can you tell us more about that?
It's a very good question. It is true that it is essential when you are dealing with a problem, particularly during the operation, to be wholly absorbed with what you're doing and do not think about the patient as a beautiful baby, emotionally involved, etc. So during a certain stage of treating patients, you should be detached. And also during evaluating outcome, you should also be detached and not say, oh, who killed this beautiful baby? Or who, no. We want to know what happened factually and to concentrate on how to stop it happening again. So to be detached is important. Having said that, there is no way to act as a machine. We are human beings. We love other human beings. We cannot sort of function without loving a beautiful baby or whatever. So getting emotionally involved at certain points during the treatment is not a crime at all. But during others, you should not yield to emotions and spoil everything.
One more. Thessaloniki flies very high today. From Professor Giannakoulas from Aristotle University of Thessaloniki. As all of us know that you are a pioneer surgeon in the congenital heart disease, tell us a few things about the future in this field.
It depends which part of the future. I think in the near future, we have precision medicine coming, personalized artificial intelligence, tailoring the patient's treatment to his or her genetic code. We have to use all the tools we have. So personalized medicine is here. Now, many patients, people ask, what is the role of surgery? And I say that surgery is with us to save massive number of people in the community around the world. But in the longer term, there should be no surgery. We should not cut people. We should find other solutions. Now people say you're talking against yourself, and why we have in our department 80% of the staff are molecular biologists and people working on mechanism rather than surgery, is because I'm convinced that in the longer term, dealing with the basic mechanisms is the answer and not cutting people.
We have a question from outside the borders. This one comes from Croatia. And I will read it as it is. In a world that seems sometimes turning its back to science, what could be the most efficient channel to increase the number of organ donors in the population?
That's an excellent question. There are many strategies. One of them, the Spanish model, has proved to be very successful. And actually, the statistics show that currently the organs which are being used are less than 10%. So we're wasting 90%. Having the Spanish model is actually having the coordinators in every hospital, and they are paid according to the number of donors generated from this hospital. Now, people say this is immoral. I think absolutely not, because what they do is to point out to people that if there is a potential donor, please don't just throw the organs because somebody else somewhere is dying waiting for an organ like that. So the Spanish model has been very, very good. Other strategies like putting signatures on driving licenses is a good one, credit cards, and using the so-called opting out. So you don't say, I want my organ to be used. You say, I do not want my organ to be used. Then if we look at your driving license and we don't find that statement, we immediately presume that you are agreeing. That, at one time I was against it, now I'm fully for it. All what I'm asking from the community, please make up your mind. I'm not asking you to donate or not to donate. I'm saying, just tell us what you want. And if you, but to leave it is not allowed.
Thank you so much, Professor Yacoub. One more for us. It's coming from a cellular immunologist from Cyprus. His name is Anastasia Dieti. Do you think that transplantation will be more successful by introducing oral tolerance as a concept in patients accepting the transplant?
Absolutely. I think this has to be the gold standard and what we all strive to. As I mentioned, the first paper which opened the gates for transplantation was entitled Induction for Specific Immune Tolerance. So there has to be a way of stopping toxic immunosuppression, which produce non-specific and just induce specific tolerance to the organ transplanted. So I agree with the question.
Thank you.
I think we still have time for one more question, and this one was raised jointly in Athens and in Creta at the same time, and it concerns the care in cardiology in post-COVID times. What do you think will change, or maybe already has changed?
I think there has been many negative things with COVID. We have suffered, when I say we, the patients, we can't admit patients this and that and the other, but we have learned a lot too, that we can do rounds very early morning from our bed, and you don't have to get into a car and drive 30 miles to see your patient. I can still see my patient and see the investigations with the methods of communication, Zoom, and witness what's happening now. In the past, I would have had to travel for several hours, maybe days, to come to Athens and then come back. And now here we are communicating beautifully. So COVID has influenced our behavior to some extent. It has also taught us that to be mindful of working together. The teams working together, it has strengthened the so-called we spirit, and rather than me spirit, and that has been positive. So there are many, many negative things, but there are also positive things, and hopefully when we get out of this nightmare, we would have learned lessons of how to behave properly and how to advance medicine in the right direction.
We still have a lot of questions coming, but due to time limitation, we'll not be able to handle more. So I don't know if I can ask you, Professor Yacoub, maybe you can honor us with another cardiology tribute evening where we can deal with at least the remaining questions we have here in the future. For now, yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. For now, we kindly ask you to stay with us because we're delighted to introduce someone very, very special. This next person is very special to the world of cardiology in general because part of her life was marked by the glory in cardiac surgery, and she's special to Professor Yacoub in particular, whom she met the first time in 1988. So let's listen to her story.
Η ιστορία μου ξεκινάει το 1988, πριν 33 χρόνια, και ήμουν 24 χρονών. Είχαμε πάει μία εκδρομή με το προσκοπισμό και έπιασε βροχή. Αυτό είχε σαν αποτέλεσμα σε 2 μέρες να εκδηλώσω πνευμονία. Η πνευμονία αυτή δεν καλυτέρευε παρόλη την φαρμακευτική αγωγή, χειροτέρευε με προβλήματα και στο στομάχι και έγινε εισαγωγή στο νοσοκομείο. Στο νοσοκομείο είπανε ότι δεν είναι θέμα πνευμόνων, δεν είναι θέμα στομάχου, κάτι πιέζει το στομάχι. Έγινε αξονική και αυτό που πίεζε το στομάχι ήταν μια πάρα πολύ μεγάλη καρδιά. Η μεγαλοκαρδία αυτή οδήγησε σε πνευμονικό είδημα και σε 5 ανακοπές. Η διάγνωση ήταν ότι δεν γίνεται κάτι άλλο παρά μόνο μεταμόσχευση καρδιάς. Μετά τη διάγνωση, η προτροπή των γιατρών ήταν ότι πρέπει να φύγω για Αγγλία, όπου υπάρχει μόνο ο καθηγητής Yacoub, γιατί στην Ελλάδα δεν γινόταν τίποτα. Πήραμε την απόφαση και φύγαμε, γιατί η μόνη λύση ήταν αυτή και έπρεπε να πω ή θα πεθάνω στην Ελλάδα ή θα πάω στην Αγγλία να κάνω μεταμόσχευση. Το Σεπτέμβριο του 1988 ταξίδεψα στο Λονδίνο. Εκεί, στο Χέρφιλντ, γνώρισα τον καθηγητή Yacoub, που η απόφασή του, αφού κοίταξε τις εξετάσεις, όλες που είχα, ήταν ότι πρέπει να κάνω μεταμόσχευση καρδιάς. Τότε γνώρισα και τον κύριο Θοδωρόπουλο. Το Φεβρουάριο του 1989 βρέθηκε το μόσχευμα. Πήγα στο νοσοκομείο για το χειρουργείο, η επέμβαση όλη κράτησε 1 ώρα και 3 τέταρτα. Όταν ξύπνησα στην εντατική, δεν αισθανόμουν ούτε πόνο, ούτε δύσπνοια. Η καρδιά χτυπούσε με φυσιολογικό ρυθμό. Εκείνο που άλλαξε μόνο επάνω μου ήταν ότι άρχισα να έχω πάλι ζωή, γιατί πριν ζωή δεν υπήρχε. Έμαθα τυχαία ότι η καρδιά προερχόταν από ένα 17χρονο κορίτσι. Οι γιατροί δεν τα παρουσίασαν όλα ρόδινα. Μου είπανε ότι από εδώ και πέρα θα ζήσω με ποιότητα, χωρίς να ξέρουν, χωρίς να μπορούν να πούν πόσα χρόνια θα ζήσω, γιατί κάθε οργανισμός αντιδράει διαφορετικά. Εκείνο που θυμάμαι πάρα πολύ καλά είναι ότι πρέπει να σεβαστώ το μόσχευμα για να με σεβαστεί και εκείνο. Η φράση αυτή σήμαινε ότι πρέπει να σεβαστώ τόσο το δωρητή, όσο και κάποιον άλλον που θα έπαιρνε το μόσχευμα που πήρα εγώ. Αν θα μπορούσα σε μία πρόταση να περιγράψω τη ζωή μου μετά τη μεταμόσχευση, θα έλεγα ότι είναι μια κανονική ζωή. Δούλευα, πήγαινα διακοπές στο νησί μου, έκανα εκδρομές. Αν πάλι θα έπρεπε μέσα σε μία πρόταση να πω για τους γιατρούς που μου έσωσαν τη ζωή, θα είναι ένα μεγάλο ευχαριστώ στον καθηγητή Yacoub και στην ομάδα του, καθώς και σε όλους τους γιατρούς που καθημερινά επιτελούν αυτό το σπουδαίο έργο. Γιατί όλοι τους είναι πάνω απ' όλα άνθρωποι και ξέρουν ότι ο ασθενής που έχουν μπροστά τους έχει κλάψει, έχει πονέσει και φοβάται για τη ζωή του. Ένα πολύ μεγάλο ευχαριστώ για τους ανθρώπους που μου έδωσαν το μόσχευμα, γιατί χωρίς τη δική τους προσφορά, όση επιστήμη και αν υπάρχει, μεταμόσχευση δεν γίνεται. Στο Χέρφιλντ υπήρχε μια επιγραφή από ένα θρησκευτικό σωματείο που έλεγε «Μην κρατάτε τα όργανά σας για τους ουρανούς, οι ουρανοί ξέρουν ότι τα χρειαζόμαστε εδώ». Το 1991 ιδρύσαμε το σύλλογό μας τη Σκητάλη, που αποτελείται από ανθρώπους που έχουν κάνει μεταμόσχευση καρδιά και πνεύμονα. Στην αρχή ήταν μόνο για να μπορέσουμε να διευκολύνουμε τη ζωή μας όσον αφορά κάποια προβλήματα που είχαμε, ιδίως με τα φάρμακά μας. Συνεχίσαμε με το να ευαισθητοποιούμε τον κόσμο για τον εγκεφαλικό θάνατο, τη δωρεά οργάνων και τη μεταμόσχευση. Και προσπαθούμε με ό,τι μέσα έχουμε, όσο είναι δυνατόν, να βοηθάμε τα μέλη μας. Πρέπει να αυξήσουμε την εμπιστοσύνη του κόσμου στο σύστημα υγείας. Πρέπει επίσης να καταλάβει ο κόσμος ότι η δωρεά οργάνων είναι η υπέρτατη προσφορά του ανθρώπου προς τον άνθρωπο πάνω στη γη. Μέσα από αυτή τη δεύτερη ευκαιρία ζωής ξαναγεννήθηκα. Νιώθω 2 φορές ευλογημένη, γιατί εκτός από την καρδιά που ζω 32 χρόνια, πριν από 7 μήνες πήρα και μόσχευμα νεφρού. Ευχαριστώ τους γιατρούς, τους δωρητές και το Θεό που με έχει καλά.
Είμαστε πολύ χαρούμενοι, γιατί σήμερα είναι μαζί μας εδώ η κυρία Λεβαντή. Είναι τιμή για μας. We are very happy and very honored that you are here with us in this special event. Σας ευχαριστούμε πάρα πολύ που είσαστε εδώ. in this special cardiology tribute, and you have at the same time Professor Sir Magdi Yacoub, which I'm sure that you want to share your thoughts. So the floor is yours. Μπορείτε να πείτε ό,τι νιώθετε για τον καθηγητή, αλλά και για όλη την εμπειρία που έχετε και όλη την ιστορία που έχετε βιώσει.
Σας ευχαριστώ πολύ για την πρόσκληση. And I would like to thank you for the 32 years of heart transplantation and the quality of life I enjoyed to this time.
Professor Yacoub, did you hear Ms. Levandi?
Thank you. Can I answer?
For sure, with pleasure.
Thank you for being here, because you give us all hope and glory, if you like. And that's what all medicine is all about, is to see the power of healing. And you have expressed your feelings in a very eloquent fashion, particularly in relation to the idea that it is not a single person doing this. It's a huge team of people, which includes the community, like you have very clearly indicated. And thank you for doing that, because the generosity of the community in being part of the system which saves lives is a wonderful thing, part of transplantation. And I understand all what you are doing for transplantation, and thank you, and may you continue to offer hope, happiness to many people through your work on transplantation. Thank you for being here. I really do appreciate it at a personal level as well.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you. Σας ευχαριστούμε πολύ, κυρία Λεβαντή, που ήσασταν εδώ. Σας έδωσε εκείνος το ευχαριστώ του και σας είπε να συνεχίσει αυτό το έργο που κάνετε τόσο καλά και αγωνίζεστε. Σας ευχαριστούμε πολύ που είσαστε εδώ.
Ευχαριστώ.
Γεια σας.
Professor Yacoub, thanks a lot for all your intervention tonight, the presentations, the presence of Mrs. Levandi. Definitely, this is touching all of us. Do you have any final message you would like to say for the participants tonight?
No, except to say thank you for organizing this interaction. As I mentioned, human interaction is the most enjoyable thing, part of the story of science, of the glory. And I enjoyed it tremendously. And thank you very much.
Thanks again, and we look forward to hosting you one more time in Greece, maybe live next time. We look forward to that. Please stay with us also, because we're moving to the last part of the evening. It's a part where we would like to remind about the role of music in medicine, but a particular music, it's Greek music. So this part was specially prepared for this evening.
Η εκδήλωσή μας συνεχίζεται με μουσική. Η ιερή κληρονομιά του Απόλλωνα. Η μουσική στην αρχαία Ελλάδα αποτελούσε θεραπευτικό μέσο των σωματικών και ψυχικών νοσημάτων. Όπως λέει και ο καθηγητής Sir Magdi Yacoub, η καρδιά είναι μια συμφωνική ορχήστρα. Παίζει στον ίδιο τόνο και με απόλυτη αρμονία κρατάει όλα τα όργανα στη ζωή. Ας υμνήσουμε λοιπόν τη ζωή, ακούγοντας ένα ηλεκτρικό κουαρτέτο εγχόρδων που συνδυάζει την κλασική μουσική με μοντέρνα ακούσματα. Ας το απολαύσουμε όλοι μαζί.
Η μουσική για τους αρχαίους Έλληνες αποτελούσε δώρο των θεών στους ανθρώπους. Ο Απόλλωνας, ο θεός του ήλιου, της ιατρικής και της μουσικής, ήταν ο κύριος εκφραστής της ελληνικής ιδέας, η οποία θεωρούσε σκοπό της ζωής την επίτευξη της αρμονίας μεταξύ της ψυχής και του σώματος.
Η μουσική στην αρχαία Ελλάδα χρησιμοποιούνταν ως θεραπευτική μέθοδος από τον Ασκληπιό, ο οποίος τη χρησιμοποιούσε για να αφυπνίσει τη θεραπευτική δύναμη της ψυχής και έτσι να αποκατασταθεί η ισορροπία ανάμεσα στη ψυχή και στο σώμα.
Στη σύγχρονη εποχή διαπιστώθηκε πως η μουσική έχει άμεση σχέση με τις λειτουργίες του ανθρώπινου σώματος, καθώς μέσα από πειράματα παρατηρήθηκαν αλλαγές στην αρτηριακή πίεση, τη σταθερότητα της αναπνοής και τον καρδιακό παλμό. Το αρχαίο ιδεώδες για τη σημασία της μουσικής δικαιώνεται και τον 21ο αιώνα.
Η καρδιά είναι μια μεγάλη συμφωνική ορχήστρα. Παίζει στον ίδιο τόνο, κάνει διαρκώς το ίδιο πράγμα με απόλυτη αρμονία και κρατά όλα τα όργανα στη ζωή. Αυτή είναι η μοναδικότητα της καρδιάς. Η καρδιά δίνει ζωή. Η ζωή είναι το πολυτιμότερο αγαθό.
This evening surely touched our hearts. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. In order to end in more beauty, we would kindly ask you to bring us a selection, a bouquet of the feelings that you're having right now. And this is why we kindly ask you to take your mobile phone or iPad and to scan the QR code that you see on the screen, the QR code below the white screen you see here. Once you scan this QR code, you'll be able to access this heart. As you can see, it's a silent heart, a heart with not much rhythm. Once you reach this heart from the screen of your mobile phone, iPad, or even computer screen, just click on it with your finger, if it's a touch screen, or with the mouse of your computer. By doing so, you'll be putting part of your life, part of your heart, into this heart to give it greater rhythm, greater life, and always a better tomorrow. So we invite you to live this experiment with us, and we'll be delighted to see that we are able to receive part of you in our evening tonight.
Πάρτε όλοι λοιπόν τα κινητά σας ή τα λάπτοπ σας και αγγίξτε την καρδιά. Δώστε της ρυθμό.
Thank you. We can see that it's working very well. We're delighted to see a lot of feelings coming from your side.
Κάθε άγγιγμα γίνεται παλμός και η καρδιά γεμίζει αισιοδοξία, γεμίζει δύναμη. Μας δίνει δύναμη.
It's beautiful to see this coming as it appears from different corners of Greece, Cyprus, beyond.
Croatia, you remember the question?
Definitely. Few more seconds.
Λίγο ακόμα και θα φτάσουμε το 100% και θα πάρουμε τη μεγαλύτερη δύναμη και τον καλύτερο παλμό. Για την καρδιά, για τη ζωή, που είναι το πολυτιμότερο αγαθό. Η καρδιά γέμισε 100% και λέξεις αισιοδοξίας βγαίνουν. Εμπιστοσύνη, αγάπη, πίστη, ελπίδα. Με αυτές τις πολύ αισιόδοξες λέξεις θα ήθελα να σας ευχαριστήσω για τη σημερινή σας συμμετοχή σε αυτή την πολύ ξεχωριστή εκδήλωση και να σας αποχαιρετήσω.
With these words of love, trust and peace, would like to thank you for your attendance and participation tonight. It was a pleasure to be with you, even remotely, and we always wish you a better tomorrow.
Until we meet again.
Isto epanidin. Have a great evening. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you.